Hello everybody and welcome. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to press your opponent using player roles, attack them with a few simple team instructions, and then how to watch a match to see if it's working. Let's get started by talking about pressing. A press in Football Manager is telling your team how you want them to close down the opponent to try and win the ball back. The more you tell them to press, the more aggressive they're going to be in closing down and trying to cause a turnover. You're probably familiar with the tactical team instruction, Trigger Press. This is a team instruction for when your team is in the defensive phase of the match. Like when the opponent has a goal kick, a throw-in, they're in a spell of possession, things like that. The lower the setting, the more selective they'll be about closing down the opponent, and they won't chase as far. The higher the setting, the more aggressive they'll close down. They will also chase the opponent for longer distances. What you should always keep in mind is that this tactical instruction applies to every single one of your outfield players, and team-wide instructions like this can cause issues. We're going to look at an example with the trigger press on its highest setting. The opponent has the ball in their defensive midfield area, and they work it into the central midfield. This is my central defender. The trigger press is telling him to aggressively close down the ball, but using the highest setting is also telling him to chase the ball for further distances. Look how far wide he goes to follow the ball, leaving a huge gap in our defense. It also means he has a further distance to get back into position. A press with a lower setting means you won't win the ball back as quick and can give your opponent time to make a pass. But you'll stay in your defensive shape better, and you're also less likely to be caught out of position. A press with a higher setting means you can win the ball back faster and disrupt the opponent's attack. But you can lose your defensive shape and, like in that example, risk being out of position. But in Football Manager, there's actually three primary ways you can tell your team to press. There's team and/or player instructions. There's your team mentality, which can also slightly change some of your team instructions. And finally, we can use player roles. And the main focus of today's video is that last option, how we can set up a pressing system using player roles designed to disrupt our opponent's attack, all without needing to use the highest setting of trigger press. Let's get started by meeting up with our favorite team in the English Premier League. Like the other tactic videos, we continue with Luton Town and our goal this season of not being relegated from the Premier League. The last we saw of the team, we had beaten Brentford, and off-screen we added another win against Brighton and then a very annoying draw against Plymouth in the FA Cup. This run of games leaves us sitting comfortably at 11th in the table. But just when we're doing well, our next match is at home against Manchester City. I have a strategy to try and beat Man City, but to do it, I need to install a new tactic and a new pressing system. But that pressing system is going to be unique in that only half of the players are going to press. We have 10 outfield players, which means 5 players are going to focus on an aggressive press, and the other 5 are going to focus on playing safe in defense. The pressing system and tactic is designed around 3 elements. The first is to disrupt their build-up play. Make it difficult to keep possession and get any sort of rhythm. This will be done with player roles. The second is to control the midfield. If they make it past the initial press, make sure we have numbers in the midfield to try and stop them. This will be done with our formation. And the third is to attack. Let's get the ball up the field quickly and try to score when they have an unsettled defensive shape. This will be done with our team mentality. Let's start to form our tactic by going over the first element. This tactic will be focused around 3 player roles. The first is the pressing forward. This is a free Football Manager top tip. If you're making a pressing system and there's a player role with the word pressing in the name, then there's a good chance they can fit in your tactic. Check out the pressing forward's description. It explains how they will press. And one phrase in particular is what I want to highlight. Prevent the opposing players having too much time on the ball. This is exactly what I want. A pressing forward will disrupt the opponent whenever they have the ball. Also take note that they have locked player instructions of close down more and tackle harder. Our second player role is the ball-winning midfielder, who is the most aggressive midfielder when trying to get the ball back. The description alludes to their pressing ability. Their main function is to close down the opposition. It only has the locked player instruction tackle harder, but closing down is so ingrained into the role that it doesn't need the close down more player instruction. Now we get to the third player role, the defensive winger. And I want to spend some time talking about the defensive winger for a second. Oftentimes you'll see a traditional winger player role given instructions like close down more or tackle harder because they want to press the opponent. You're probably tired of me saying this in recent videos, but a player role that has locked player instructions built into the role's DNA will always behave differently than a player role given those instructions, which means that a winger with tackle harder as added instructions would not behave the same as a role with those built in. That's where a defensive winger comes in. Let's look at the description. Aims to press the opposing fullbacks. Exactly what I want. And they have locked player instructions of tackle harder and close down more. And a defensive winger is still a winger, meaning they're going to dribble at the defense and get in crosses. In the next section, let's see how those player roles fit into a formation. The formation is the second element of my pressing system, where I want to control the midfield. And this is the one I'm going with, a 3-1-4-2 or a 3-5-2 if you prefer. There are 5 roles focused on pressing, 2 pressing forwards, 2 defensive wingers, and a ball-winning midfielder. The other 5 are focused on holding the formation's shape and providing cover. I chose this formation because it allows me to control the midfield. We have 5 players in the midfield area, and when defending, the pressing forward on defend will drop back as well, meaning we're going to have at least 6 players defending that area. And hopefully this is how the press will work. The pressing forwards and defensive wingers will press the center backs and flank players to disrupt their buildup. If Man City make it past them, we have 2 Carrileros who will be positioned in the midfield to offer resistance. If they get past the Carrileros and start to progress towards our goal, we have the ball-winning midfield in the defensive midfield area to cause further chaos. And if they manage to get past all of that, our 3 center backs will be our last line of defense. With our tactical instructions, I'm not too worried about keeping possession, so the slightly more direct passing and the higher tempo will tell my players to get the ball up the field quickly. The high press line of engagement is mainly for the pressing forwards, since it's better for them to start their press higher up the field. You may have noticed, but none of the player roles I've chosen are playmakers. In fact, none of the player roles I would even consider attack focused. The strikers would be the exception, but even then one of them is on a defend duty. So how do we make sure we provide enough of an attacking threat going forward? Well, this is where the third element comes in, the attacking mentality. You've probably used a team mentality before, which is the overall mentality given to every one of your players in the tactic, but each individual player role has their own player mentality as well. In this tactic, right now we're on the balanced mentality. If I go to the Carrilero and his player instructions, his individual player mentality is also balanced. I want to use the attacking mentality because of this section. Exploit space in the final third by employing a fast tempo and more direct passing. When my team wins the ball, we're going to exploit space behind the Man City defenders. But changing your team's mentality also changes your player's role mentality. On the attacking mentality, if we go back to the Carrilero, their player mentality has increased to positive. So even though we have more defense-focused player roles, I can raise the aggressiveness of my entire team by changing our team mentality. This means I can use the player roles I want to use, but now we're going to be more of an attacking threat going forward. But be aware that raising your team's mentality will change other things as well. For example, our trigger press has actually increased a little too, going from standard to slightly more often. So our press has increased without needing to touch the trigger press team instruction. Okay, now that we have our pressing system and tactic in place, I think we're ready for the match. As a heads up about the highlight, there was a bunch of snow and mud and stuff in the match, so that's why the field is going to look a little different. Anyway, on to the first half. Our first clip is from the 3rd minute and shows how our pressing works. Man City has the ball near the sideline, and my pressing forward is applying pressure. The ball is brought into the center midfield, and we see the benefit of my formation. We have 4 players around the ball, but we also have 4 players back. Man City can't get through and their attack breaks down. Here's another example of the press from the 9th minute. As they get to the halfway line, the ball-winning midfielder is going to close down the ball when it gets into the center. Once again, their attack breaks down. In the 17th minute, Man City has a throw-in. The pressing forward is going to aggressively close down the ball and force the turnover. Our direct passing and high tempo gets it up the field. A great chance, but our striker just isn't fast enough. In the 27th minute, Man City is finally able to work the ball through the midfield. They get a shot away, but it's off target. And I showed that last clip because that was actually Man City's first shot from open play in 30 minutes. They had 2 other shots from free kicks, but they were wayward headers and didn't offer much threat. This is from the 40th minute, and Man City are trying the other flank. The defensive winger is going to track and close down the ball carrier. As it gets to the corner, the ball-winning midfielder is applying the on-ball pressure. But let's focus on my other defenders. My defensive winger is blocking the outlet pass. I have 4 defenders in the box compared to only 3 attackers. And the 2 carrileros in pressing forward each have a player marked outside the penalty box, meaning there's nowhere to go. The ball-winning midfielder wins the throw-in. This is an example of the pressing system I wanted to implement. Have some players aggressively closing down the ball, and if that doesn't work, have players behind him providing cover. And for the next clip, this is a bit of foreshadowing, but if you're ever playing a team like Man City who like to press you, a high-tempo, direct-style passing can be a great counter for that. This is because you can work the ball quickly through their defense and exploit any gaps that their press has created, kind of like what we talked about in the beginning of the video. We're going to watch the highlight at full speed and pay attention to how my players don't dwell on the ball when they're pressed. They are focused on getting it, passing it to a teammate, and moving it up the field. Now we're at halftime and we are up 1-0. We've created some chances for ourselves, even scored a goal, but most importantly, our pressing system is working because it's stifling their attack. I didn't make any halftime adjustments because everything was working, so let's see what the second half can bring. We start the second half, picking up a highlight in the 48th minute. All we're going to do is focus on the pressing forward on defend. My favorite part about this role is that he's just annoying. Doesn't give anyone time on the ball, closes down opponents, is a big hassle as they're trying to build out from the back. And all of this is built into the player role. I don't have to tell him to do anything. When he finally wins the ball back, look at where he's at, in the defensive midfield area. This is his teammate, the pressing forward on attack, a big difference in their positioning. And now let's give some love to the defensive winger. Man City's center back has the ball in the 51st minute. This player is going to make a cut inside, and the defensive winger is going to track that run. But because he was tracking that run, our flank is now exposed. But that's okay because he'll just go win the ball back himself and start our counter. Earlier I mentioned how you can't replicate player roles just by using player instructions, and those 2 highlights are what I mean. Our pressing forward was in the defensive midfield area winning the ball. Our defensive winger tracked a run and then went to the byline to win the ball back. So hopefully this helps show that player roles have a huge impact on how you want to play. In the 59th minute, this is Man City building out from the back. This second half is all about showing love to those underappreciated roles, so here's the no-nonsense center back. You won't see him much during a match, but if you do, it's in crucial situations. Man City break through our press and get it to the best striker in the game, but who's there to save us? The no-nonsense center back. Our defensive winger gets the ball and dribbles at the defenders, because remember, he is a winger. And we eventually win the corner. This is the resulting corner, where we get a great chance on goal. The shot was blocked, but we get another set-piece chance. So 60th minute, we're up 2-0, playing well, feeling great. Unfortunately, they still have Erling Haaland, and it's at this point he decided to turn into the Terminator. About 30 seconds after we scored, he gets a chance right in front of goal, which nearly gave me a heart attack. And then a minute after that, he gets free again. Finally, about 15 minutes later, near disaster. Thankfully, he was offside. But starting from the 77th minute, they didn't get a single shot away for the rest of the match. In the 83rd minute, our pressing forwards win the ball and link up for one final chance, but by that point, we're home free. The match ends and we win 2-0. Here are the match stats if you are curious. As with my other tactic videos, there's no trickery or save scumming or any kind of thing to influence the match. All I did was make the tactic, I watched the entire match, and I take some notes. The only tactical changes were some subs, and then in like the 85th minute, I added the waste time team instruction, but other than that, it stayed exactly the same. And how did the tactic do? Well, I thought it did pretty great, I'd say. Man City was stifled throughout the entire match. So what are some steps you can take if you want to make this kind of tactic for yourself? The first is that this tactic is customizable and adaptable. I imagine it would do well if you wanted to make something like a possession-based system instead of the direct passing style like we did. You don't have to use this exact formation either, as the philosophies we talked about will still work with a number of formations. And in your upcoming matches, you could add opposition player instructions to further customize your pressing traps. As we wrap up, my hope for this video, and really my channel in general, is to show you that every role in Football Manager can be effective and that no role is better than another role, well, except maybe the central midfielder on attack. And when the defensive winger starts showing up in Football Manager tactics, you remember where you saw it first. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching.